We're back, day 4 in House of Paint's Knowledge Conference 2020. It is Sunday afternoon, and I once again want to extend my gratitude to all of you who have been spending your weekend with us on the internet. I know that our beautiful weekends are coming to a close soon here in Ottawa, so spending this time online is something we're very grateful for. Thank you for connecting with these artists and community, and continuing these conversations with us as we grow together separately during these trying times. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge our funders and partners at House of Paint, without whom we would not be able to have this knowledge conference. We are a grassroots organization, and we do rely on public support to bring you this programming. So I'd like to thank the City of Ottawa, Ontario Arts Council, the Government of Canada, Canadian Heritage, Association des communautés francophones de Ottawa, CVC Ottawa, Ottawa Bilingue, Dominion City, Alternative Hosting, Ill Abilities, Mural Roots, Ottawa Music Industry Coalition, and produced by youth. Now, our next session is very exciting. We have 3 women who run Night Lab with us. I'd like to introduce you to Sheena, Nick, and Martina, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about Night Lab and then present this wonderful presentation on collaborative music projects. Thank you so much for being here with us, Night Lab.
Thanks so much for having us. So I'm just going to start off here, and we're just going to talk a little bit about what the presentation was or is about, just in case maybe you forgot. So Better Together, we're going to talk about collaborating with other artists on a track and a remix, and how it can be a great way to hone your craft, strengthen your relationships, and introduce yourself to new audiences. Collaborative projects can also be very tricky to navigate, so especially when the goals and values of those involved aren't necessarily aligned. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to talk about some soft relationship skills, as well as some hard skills about releasing a remix or collaborative project. So first of all, we're going to talk about working with artists and their teams on a track or remix. Then we're going to cover developing relationships with potential collaborators, setting clear expectations, and promoting the project together, and managing conflict when it arises. So it's going to be divided into 5 modules. We're going to be talking about relationships, building and maintaining them, expectations, learning how to manage expectations, both your own and the project expectations, execution, how you are going to execute your project in a timely and efficient manner, release ready, which is a running checklist of all the things you need to make sure that your release is ready to enter the world. And last, the hype machine. So of course, promoting your project. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Night Lab and who we are. So again, we're Sheena, Martina, and Nick, and we're part of Night Lab, which is a boutique research, strategy, and design agency on a mission to unlock the full potential of cities by supporting the development of their nighttime economy. So when we talk about the nighttime economy, we're talking about the festive portion of the nighttime economy, which includes anything from concerts to nightclubs to pubs to restaurants. We basically believe that if a city maximizes its potential between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., and that also includes supporting cultural workers, and that they plan it in a safe and inclusive manner, that we could have a vibrant, safe nightlife that is beneficial to everyone. So I'm going to talk about the first module, which is relationships. And I'm going to cover how to find collaborators, how to build relationships, and maintaining those relationships through times of conflict. So finding collaborators. And this is very interesting for me because coming from the electronic music world, most of the time we've already given up on doing collaborations and have decided to work solo. So when you come to the point in your career when you decide that it's better for you to be collaborative, that it actually helps you reach your goals, then that's kind of the best time for the project. So now that you've identified that, that is the best way to achieve your goals, how can you find the right collaborative partner? So what I like to do from my personal experience and what we've talked about is choose collaborators based on mutual goals, genuine interest, and connection. Just kind of like we came together because of our genuine interests, Nick Martina and I. You've defined your goals, you've brainstormed about the people, groups, or organizations in your network who can help you achieve those goals. So the next you want to do is identify the gaps between your existing network and the connections that you would like to make. Because at this point, when you're identifying those gaps, it could help you realize who the first connectors or the people who can introduce you to a collaborator who might have a one-on-one experience with that collaborator is. Last, you have to ask yourself what is in it for them. So a good collaboration is mutually beneficial. So identifying the priorities and the desired outcomes for both parties will not only help reduce conflict, but will help you learn how to sell or pitch your project. So, and the last one is, the last one is first contact. Which is also very important. I can't believe I almost missed it. How do you end up making that first contact for that person once you've identified the person, network, or group, organization that you want to make that sort of collaboration with? There are three ways, or three that I found in my work. Forming direct relationships. That one is probably the most important. Direct relationships are a great way to start off a working partnership because you already have a base to start off with. So before the pandemic, there was things like meetups and approaching regular people at like concerts or events or gatherings. But now with us going into the virtual space too, there's still opportunity for that. So creating those mutual positions are a great way to start off. Last is what I meant. Secondly is what I mentioned before, the first connectors. So when you identify the gaps in your network and identify those connectors, getting them to introduce you to someone is also a good way to start a partnership. And lastly, genuinely the last one, social networks. So if you don't necessarily have someone to introduce you and you don't know the person at all, what you could do is you could hit someone up on social networks. Email tends to be a little bit more professional and kind of shows that you've done a little bit of research to be able to get an email. But if that's kind of like not accessible to you or you can't find it, then social media works as well. And social media is also really good to keep a conversation going about a project. Start telling them off, start off by telling them how and why you're interested in their work and let the conversation just kind of flow from there. So in summary, just good collaborations, everyone wins, everyone is proud of what they're putting into the world, and lastly, everyone feels valued and respected for their contributions.
So building relationships takes time. You can't just like walk up to someone and be like, do you want to collaborate on this giant project or start a business with me overnight? There's kind of a process to it. Oftentimes, like Sheena was saying, those relationships start with shared interests. And through those shared interests, you have an opportunity to spend some quality time together, really develop some of those conversations and get to know each other a bit. And that can help you unlock what your core values are. Those core values are those deeply held beliefs about what's right and good in the world and for the world and in your own life. And from there, it's about setting expectations so that everyone knows what's going on and what other people are looking for, right? And this is important in your professional relationships as well as your personal relationships. Like if, say for example, you just want to work on a track and someone wants to start a business with you, you're not in alignment. And it can be hard and awkward to have some of these conversations and it requires a lot of vulnerability, but if you can talk about your expectations up front, it's going to save a lot of confusion and hurt feelings and resentment down the road. And underlining all good, healthy relationships is a solid base of communication. So it's, it takes effort. you have to communicate regularly, and that's not like you have to be blowing up your phone 24/7, but you have to find a pattern that works for both of you, and it has to be consistent. And communication is really what drives everything forward, through the interests, through the core values, through the expectations, and through conflict when it arises.
So maintaining relationships. Relationships are about the journey, not the destination. So the best collaborative relationships lead to destinations, but they aren't destinations in themselves. Like all relationships, they take an ongoing effort and they can evolve, they will evolve and change over time. Laying solid groundwork helps the relationship navigate through these changes.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about managing conflict. So conflict is part of all relationships, and learning how to manage those conflicts preemptively instead of reacting in the moment can really save you a lot of time, possibly money, and a lot of emotional work, especially identifying whether that conflict is positive or negative, which helps you determine whether or not the project is worth pursuing. So I'm going to talk about the three general types of conflicts. Like, it does get more nuanced than this, but for intents and purposes, we're going to stick to these three. So we want to talk about task conflict, which is a disagreement over a part of the project, creative direction, or budget. Then we have relationship conflict, and that conflict involves like personality, opinions, and feelings about the process or possibly the situation. And last, we're going to talk about values conflict, which is like conflict over deeply held beliefs and values that basically make up who you are. So positive conflict is task process conflict. And the reason why it's positive is that it can impact a team's performance because it requires an understanding of the task. So how the task will get completed, and it promotes like critical evaluation of all the things that go forward to making that task possible. Also realize that it's pretty much a good indicator that both participants are very passionate about the project. The other two types of conflict are negative. So first of all, we're going to do with the least negative one, which is relationship conflict. It still does tend to impact the performance of a project negatively, and usually increases hostility between people working together, and reducing the collaboration potential. It takes away from the task at hand as well. It almost always leads to negative team outcomes. So you'll have to decide if the benefits of the project outweigh the negatives at this point in time. The last one is values conflict. And this arises not just because people have different values, because people do work together with different values, but when there's a value conflict, it arises when people attempt to force one set of values onto another. And this pretty much is non-negotiable. Most of the time, the project will pretty much fall apart. And at this point, I'd recommend like walking away from the project if this is happening.
So to manage conflict, there's quite a lot of prep work that you can do to help at least lessen the impact of a lot of different types of conflict. First thing, screen for those values conflicts before you agree to collaborate wherever possible. If you're getting a sense that someone is going to have values that are in direct conflict with your own, you're going to want to think about whether there's someone that you're able to work with effectively. If you're an artist, listen to their music, like really pay attention to the lyrics. Are they saying things about people or groups of people that you just can't stand behind and you don't want your name behind? If so, regardless of what that's going to do for your career, it's not worth it for your own value system. Agree how you'd like to handle task and most relationship conflicts, like the less serious ones, when things are good. It's good to talk about how you negotiate and navigate conflict when things are at their best, because if you wait until you're already in a conflict, you're reacting out of a place of like heightened emotions and heightened sensitivities, and it's just going to escalate the conflict instead of de-escalating it. Write down your conflict resolution strategy as part of your partnership or collaboration agreement, and it should be rooted in respect for and understanding of each other's conflict styles. Are you accommodating, avoiding, compromising, collaborating, competing? It's not that there's one conflict style that's better or superior to the others. Everyone's conflict styles come from their own upbringings, how they're socialized through school, through different institutions, their first work experiences. Understanding where your conflict style comes from and where the conflict style of the other person that you're working with is coming from is going to really help you navigate some of those things. And things to watch out for is when conflict styles can create power imbalances. So for example, if you're really accommodating and you're collaborating with someone who's really competing, you can end up in a situation where you're always appeasing them because that's your conflict resolution style. And they're always going for the win. So you end up losing, they end up winning. That's not great for the collaboration, and it's not great for the relationship because the collaboration is going to miss out on your input and the relationship's going to end up building up a lot of resentment. So you need to try to find a way to make sure that you can balance out that playing field. It could be something as simple as like, if there's creative feedback that needs to be presented, doing it in writing as opposed to in the heat of a moment in a meeting where you can end up in conflict, or, you know, setting clear deadlines for providing feedback, or even taking a breather, or making sure that in those meetings, everyone has a chance to talk and to listen. That's really a great way of being able to try to get ahead of a lot of these conflicts. Now, when conflict happens, first step, take a breather. Oftentimes you can kind of get a sense if things aren't going your way that like, for both of you, if they're not going away, not just if they're not going personally your way, things are starting to get heated and it's maybe starting to look like you're not going to be able to find a resolution. Take a break, take a step back before one or both of you says things that you can't take back. That whole like sticks and stones thing, like that whole like tough guy approach, that doesn't work. Sticks and stones are what break relationships and they erode trust, and it becomes really difficult to come back from that. Once you've lost respect for someone and trust in that relationship, it's much, much harder to rebuild it than it is to try to take the steps to de-escalate the conflict and remove yourself from the situation beforehand, because what you say in anger more often isn't actually what you're saying or thinking or feeling about the other person. And a lot of times you're going to find that these conflicts are because of miscommunications in the first place. So take a step back, agree to a time when you're going to revisit it. It could be 20 minutes if you're both people that need to process things very quickly. It could be a few hours, but I really recommend trying not to leave it for more than 24 hours. Otherwise, when you revisit it, you're not going to remember as clearly what the actual source of the original conflict was. And then when you start dealing with people's memories, you can end up piling in a bunch of different issues into that one specific conflict that was maybe about like what color the logo should be. And before you know it, you're in like an intractable conflict that's going to bring down the collaboration. Revisit the written agreements when you're in conflict. If you've thought about things in advance, a lot of the answers are already going to be in the written agreements about timelines, roles, responsibilities, decision-making, etc. So take the time to look at those agreements, look at the conflict resolution process in the agreements, and see if your answer is already there. And if it's not, is there a solution you can both live with? Maybe you're not like super stoked. Maybe one of you really wants teal and the other one wants purple, but you both are okay with red. Maybe red is the solution. And ultimately, remember, you're always on the same team. If you're fighting, it should be fighting with each other towards a goal, not fighting against each other to try to see who wins. You're on the same team. If you win, you win together. If you lose together. Ultimate goal, make this collab. Then you only win if the collaboration works. If it falls apart in the early stages, you both lost. So we've been talking a lot about healthy conflict. It's also important to kind of keep in mind what unhealthy conflict looks like. Healthy conflict should be safe. It should feel safe because it's grounded in respect for your work and for one another. Healthy conflict is constructive and productive. And once you are able to start navigating healthy conflict with someone, it really adds a layer of depth to that working relationship or to that personal relationship. Healthy conflict it's not about winning or losing. There should be no winners or losers. You're on the same team, right? It shouldn't be violent. And it doesn't just mean like, you're not like throwing punches at each other. It also means like, look at the language that you're using. Are you yelling? Are you screaming? Are you using slurs? Are you like really aggressive in your tone? Unhealthy conflict is demoralizing and it can be dehumanizing, and it leaves people not feeling great about the situation, the project, and themselves. And if you're in a situation where there's repeated unhealthy conflict, that's a situation you need to move out of, regardless of the product in the end.
Okay, so we're just going to continue.
Expectations.
Yeah.
We're going to continue on with expectations. So a couple of things with expectations is you have to learn how to, number one, choose your battles. When there's something you're not happy about, you have to determine whether or not it's worth risking the project for. And we've talked about this before. The best thing to do is to beforehand determine what items are non-negotiable, and then be willing to compromise or come to some some way in the, like meet in the middle on the rest of those. Understand that reasonable compromise is how all relationships move forward, and accept sometimes when it's not time for the collaboration to take place. Maybe it's just time for you both to like walk away from the project if your goals and priorities don't align. So second one is about managing expectations, and especially your own expectations. Don't discount a person right away if they don't check out your, like every box, you know? They might not be trippy red, but like they could be someone who's going to end up being in a perfectly awesome collaboration for once you start building that relationship. So remember that what sometimes starts off as an okay collaboration could end up to be a great one. And lastly, get it in writing. Don't assume that your collaborators are on the same page as you, even if you have a lot in common, or even if you have a previous relationship. Outline each partner's goals and clearly identify what the partnership brings to each person. And investing this time upfront can save you confusion, misunderstanding, and a lot of lost time on the project.
And make sure to get it in writing. So written agreements, they will provide clarity, they will prevent misunderstandings, especially if you're collaborating on the agreement itself. They outline roles, responsibilities, and milestones to keep everyone on the same page. This can be an agreement between you and a producer, between you and between an artist and a manager. It can also be an agreement between something like a brand that wants to sponsor an artist for sponsored posts on social media.
And just to really hammer home like the importance of getting it in writing, we're going to go over the two main kinds of collaborative agreements that you're going to be looking at. So partnership and collaborative agreements are more broad. They're less about like the specific nuance of a project and more about how the collaborative relationship is going to function. So the scope, is it a one-time thing or is it ongoing? Roles and responsibilities, and make sure you talk about in the agreement what happens if responsibilities aren't being fulfilled. So if someone, and there's a couple of collaborators in a larger project, just isn't able to meet their responsibilities consistently, is there a process to either bring in support to help them meet those responsibilities? Or if it's like an unwillingness to meet those responsibilities on their part, is there an opportunity to either buy them out or to ask them to receive less compensation, or in some cases, ultimately leave the project? It's important that everyone feels valued and respected, as we were saying before. So like, you don't want to avoid the situation like in school where you were working on group projects and one person ends up doing everything and everyone gets the A or the B or the C. Make sure that when you're putting in your clauses about conflict resolution processes, you include a parachute. Sometimes people have to leave projects. It could be for personal reasons. It could be because there's a values conflict that they just can't get past. That, you know, to continue working on the project would cause them a moral injury, like it would hurt their sense of self. Or there's a relationship conflict and it's just not a healthy situation for anyone to be in, and someone wants to walk away. Provide them with a parachute. It's not about expecting the project or the collaboration to fail. It's about making it safe for someone to say, I can't do this anymore, and leave in a way where there's as much respect for everyone in the situation as possible. Also, talk about the financial management in terms of like, especially if you're looking at setting up a business partnership and an ongoing relationship, like a collective, figure out who's going to be paying, recording, and recouping expenses. Oftentimes, like if you're starting a new business or whatever, it's the person who's in the best position to be able to cover some of those expenses. Maybe they have the best paying day job with the least financial obligations, that they're covering a lot of those expenses, but make sure that they're also the ones getting recouped first when income starts coming in. And talk about how profits are going to be shared. Are you going to split everything equally? Are you going to start splitting everything equally right away, or after all the expenses are recouped? Knowing that is going to avoid a lot of confusion and a lot of hurt feelings and misunderstandings. If people think like, oh, well, we've made, you know, $1,200 off this track, there's 3 of us, that means I get $400. But if the expenses were like $1,800, it doesn't mean that you're going to see that money until those expenses are recouped. Project agreements tend to be a lot more specific. They include the scope of the project. They include the timelines, which are soft, and deadlines or miles are hard. And it's important whenever possible to communicate in advance and the roles and responsibilities pertaining to that specific project. Say you have like 2 videographers in your group, but one of the videographers is also really, really good at accounting. Maybe for that specific project, they're having to take on doing the budget stuff while the other videographer does the videos. Like, make sure that that's discussed in advance and that everyone is making a more or less equal contribution to the project by bringing their own set of skills to the table, and that they feel like they're being utilized. Budgets. For the specific project, it's so important to make sure that you talk about how expenses are going to be handled in advance. It's very often the case where if you don't discuss it, you end up showing up or agreeing to a service, and then it's like, oh, well, we just got this bill from the studio, or this bill from the lawyer, or a bill from the videographer. How are we going to pay it? And it's going to be whoever's name happens to be on that bill has to cough up the cash, regardless of whether they're in a financial position to do that or not. And if they're not expecting to be the only person covering that expense, that's a quick way to tank a relationship. If you're putting someone else in financial precarity, it can be very, very difficult to maintain a trusting and respectful relationship going forward. Also, it's important to talk about who's going to receive the payments. A lot of times it's easier if the person who's doing most of the outlay is also the first person receiving, so that it decreases the time it takes for them to be able to recoup expenses. But it could be the case that like there's only one person in the group that has like an Ontario bank account and it's Ontario funding, or like, you know, that there's a specific reason why they need to be the person to recoup the funding or to receive the payment. Make sure that that's understood by everyone in advance and how the process for paying out is going to look. Compensation and credits, including royalties. How does each person want to be recognized for their efforts? How do they legally need to be recognized for their efforts, especially if royalties are due? That's important to talk about and include in the project agreement, as well as the decision-making process related to decisions pertaining to that project. Say it's a very short-term project and it's just like you're in an ongoing collaborative relationship. It's just one piece of what you're doing. Maybe if that project's not like a key priority, people responsible for certain areas might just have executive decision-making power, as opposed to like going to the group for consensus on everything. Or there could be key things that they need to come to the larger group for consensus about, but certain decisions they can make on their own. Making sure that you have that outlined in the project agreement is going to resolve a lot of the task and process conflict well into advance, because it's going to stop misunderstandings about who gets to provide input, how input is valued, and when. So now, how to execute a project.
Yeah, let's talk about execution. So grants and public funding are a great way to entirely or partially fund your project, whether it's an EP, whether it's a music video, in some cases a tour. In Canada, there's a lot of options for artists to get funding, for example, Factor, or municipal and provincial funding bodies for artists, as well as organizations like Canada Council for the Arts. This is just to name a few. There's also like annual kind of contests emerging, or mid-career artists can apply to like win money to record a video. It's pretty broad. But let's start with Factors. So Factor, one of the Factor grants is the Artist Development Grant, which runs twice a year. It's a great opportunity for artists to fund their projects, and it also requires artists to provide Factor with a very detailed description of where they are right now, where they want to go, how they want to get there, and what the budget is. So most artists don't get the Factor grant the first time, But if you go through the process, apply, and get feedback, even if you don't get it, you're still left with a really solid plan, which is worthwhile in my opinion. There's also the City of Ottawa, which offers a lot of great funding for artists of all levels. So for folks under 30, there's the Youth and Culture Pilot Program, which has been running about twice a year. The next deadline is in January. So it's a $1,000 grant with like a very straightforward application. You don't need to sign up within a portal or anything. You just have to fill out the application, and it can be used for creation, I believe research. If you want to work with a mentor, you can apply for mentorship, that kind of thing. And there's also the Creation and Production Fund through the City of Ottawa, which is exactly what it sounds like, creation and production. The Ontario Arts Council offers a music recording project. The deadline is in November for this one as well. And Canada Council for the Arts offers all kinds of grants. So there's a research and creation grant. They offer support for Canadian artists touring. Obviously that's not happening right now, but before COVID, they offered grants for touring across Canada, for building markets outside of Canada, that kind of thing. And they also do project-based grants, specific initiatives that will be available only once or until they like spend a certain amount. So moving on to royalties and credits. So credits acknowledge the contributions of writers, performers, and producers. A license allows the song to be played or performed on its own or as part of another work. Royalties are how contributors and rights holders are compensated for licenses, and performing rights organizations collect royalties on behalf of writers, performers, and the owners of the recordings. So performing rights organizations are bodies designed to help you collect royalties on the songs you've written or performed on. In Canada, the main PROs, the main performing rights organizations, are SOCAN, Connect, CMRRA, Resound, and MROC. So SOCAN collects license fees for the performances of live or recorded music on the behalf of songwriters. Connect collects public performance and reproduction royalties on behalf of recording makers, so labels and self-releasing artists. CMRRA collects reproduction royalties on behalf of publishers and self-published artists. And Resound or MROC, you pick one, collects royalties for artists that perform on recorded tracks, including tracks they've written. So if you're an independent artist writing your own music, you need to register with these PROs if you want to collect your royalties. If you don't register for them, you simply won't collect your royalties.
So one of the things that often comes up, especially for hip hop and some forms of electronic music, is samples. So samples are snippets of other songs or parts of songs, like the beat, the guitars, or the hook, that are included in new compositions, so new songs. They've been used in hip hop and some forms of electronic music since the very beginning. And initially, thinking about samples and clearing samples wasn't a huge deal, and you would often like release songs without clearing the samples. But now the rights owners of the songs that are sampled understand that there's a lot of money to be made. And so they tend to crack down on improper sample usage. So when you release music containing samples, you need permission from the owner of the recording, so either the record label or the artist if they're independent, and the writers or composers of the original song, often through their publisher. And this permission does require compensation. The more famous the artist, the more expensive getting clearance. And a lot of times, really famous artists just simply won't clear samples at all. And the clearance process can take a while. So as soon as you know that you want to include a sample, make sure you get started on reaching out to the people you need to reach out to in negotiating a price if they're open to allowing you to sample. Do whatever you can to make sure that you have a backup plan. Again, hope for the best, hope that you're going to be able to get the sample and it's going to be within budget, but prepare for the worst, which is not getting that clearance. You don't want a great track to be held up because you can't get a sample cleared. So paying for beats. If there isn't a producer among the partners on the project, chances are you're going to be looking at a beat. Thanks to, there's a lot of producers that are releasing beats online. It's easier than ever before to find a great track. but their license agreements aren't made equally. And you have to know what you're agreeing to before you sign or you click buy, because once you've paid, there's absolutely no going back. And it will be very, very costly if you have to try to renegotiate or deal with the license or getting the wrong kind of license afterwards. And it often involves getting a lawyer, which is very, very expensive. So the things you're going to want to look for include exclusivity. You're going to want to look for universal global exclusivity. There's a lot of cases where artists either get like just regional exclusivity or they don't get exclusivity at all, and then they distribute their song, they put it up on Spotify or YouTube, and then it gets taken down like the next day because the algorithms that are designed to catch copyright infringement notice that the beat is the same as another song. It's also really hard to get media coverage for a song that's the same as someone else's song. There have been times where like I've had music journalists reach out because like like in a group chat, because like someone has submitted, like there's been 3 different versions of the exact same beat with different lyrics like submitted in the same week for like a playlist. You don't want to be that person. Make sure that your license allows you to get high quality and track out WAV and MP3s. If you don't get the track outs, which separate the individual like pieces of the song, you can't adjust the mix to your vocals and the track is going to sound pretty weird. If you can't do any mixing or mastering really to try to make sure that your vocals line up with the sounds in the track. Try to make sure that you always get unlimited distribution. Limited distribution is going to really limit where you can post the track. Limited distribution will often only allow you to post the track on your Soundcloud or like your website, and it has to be explicitly for non-commercial purposes. Unlimited distribution allows you to put the track on, you know, Bandcamp or all of the streaming or other major streaming services like Spotify, Apple Music, and it allows you to sell copies of the track. It also allows you to license the track down the road if other people want to use it. Without unlimited distribution, you can't do any of that. Split credits and tags. So make sure you're entitled to at least 50% of the royalties. Check whether they want or need writing credit for you to use the track. And if you have to include their tag, sometimes you'll have to record your own version of their tag to put into the track. Sometimes they'll provide you one, but you have to really adhere to the credit requirements of your license. And a license that looks like a great deal up front, that's like maybe $60, $80, $100 for a beat, could end up costing thousands and thousands of dollars down the road if you don't make sure that you've got the right type of license for what your goal is. So it's better to spend the extra $50 or $100 or sometimes $200 up front and save yourself the headaches going forward.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about releasing a remix, and just in case you decide your collaboration is not original product, know your market, analyze the risks of remixing within your genre or crossing over. So there's benefits and negatives to both. If you are doing a remix within your same genre, it's a familiar market and you're guaranteed an audience. However, that can lead to some oversaturation and cause fatigue, and your audience could get bored. The other one is crossing over into a new genre. This can introduce an artist to a whole new market, and it can even create a whole new genre. The risk is that you can miss the target and end up with something too obscure for the market completely. Another important point is to make sure to coordinate your social activity to maximize your reach. Post on all socials, make sure to tag each other and to cross promote. This helps build your following, but be mindful of each other's schedules and don't promote over each other. Another thing too is to think about the platform. Where are you promoting or streaming this content? And this is something that you should really consider before even releasing the track. Who is your audience and what platform would be best to reach them? Remember that algorithms are getting better, so be clever. Do a bit of research on how they work before release day and find out which platform will be the more advantageous to you reaching your goals. Lastly is, and this one's close to my heart, don't pay for a remix. Unless you have an agreement with the artist that you're remixing, and you don't ever want to pour like a lot of money into promotion or advertising of remixes. And the reason why is because it's simply not your music. Because you technically don't own the music, you really shouldn't be making money off of it. If you do decide to charge for a remix, that's called a bootleg, and I can guarantee that if you do make money off of this, and you make a lot of money off of this, an artist is going to be knocking on your door in the future, or a lawyer with a cease and desist letter.
Okay, let's talk about getting release ready. So the road to release. The first step to any release is naturally making the track or the project. So lay down the track, make sure it sounds how you want it to sound, and then you can start developing your comms plan. So decide how you're going to tell the story with the track, with the comms plan. You want to create a cohesive story for whatever it is you're putting out. So decide what media you want to cover it, what playlists, if there's influencers or brands that you want to partner with for the launch, any of this. And then you can start creating your supporting content. So does that look like a fresh set of photos, a music video, or do you need like clips from the existing music video, new graphics, anything you need to support the track, anything you need to market it. And then you can start getting your press kits ready. So make sure any media outlet you want to cover, that you're reaching out to them 3 to 6 weeks in advance. Also make sure not to like attach the track as a file, send some sort of private link, just don't attach it. And then you can upload it to a digital distributor. So upload to a digital distributor well in advance of the release, so there's no surprises, and that you can ensure that your track goes out on the day that you said it will come out, and then you're ready to launch.
So digital distribution, there's a lot of digital distributors designed to help artists, managers, and labels simplify getting their music on the major streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Tidal, and Deezer. You upload your music and metadata to them, and then they'll push it out to multiple services. Spotify has a few preferred distributors, and we highly recommend DistroKid. It pays out monthly, has an annual fee of about $20 US, and it has really great immediate integration with Spotify for artists, which will allow you to access your analytics and use them to make smart decisions once the track's released and going forward in terms of marketing, touring, when that's allowed again, etc. Metadata is critical information embedded in or submitted alongside a track that's being publicly distributed. You add it before, during your upload to your digital distributor, and it's essential in making sure fans can find the song and for royalty collection. It includes name of track, track length, year released artist, writers, composers, performing artists, and producer. It's very, very difficult to change metadata once it's been submitted and the track's been released. So you really do need to double check your accuracy for names, especially if people are using stage names with everyone being credited. Otherwise, you will not be able to collect the royalties. It becomes extremely, extremely difficult to collect royalties if things don't match up with how people are registered with their own performing rights organizations.
Okay, support content. So you also need to plan your support content. What kind of content do you need for this release? Photos, a new bio, video clips, stills from the video. How many posts are you going to need on how many platforms, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all these are all things you have to consider. Again, with the budget, make sure you have the budget for a new photographer, if you need to work with one, or if you need someone to write your bio. And at that point, you also have to take their time into consideration. So how much time do they need to turn whatever you need around, and how is that going to fit into your timeline? Okay, so you've made it to release day. So make sure to be awake at 12 a.m. to make sure the track went live, and so you can be the first person to share it. Set a Google alert for your name and the song name. Wake up early and make sure to share it on social media. Then can share anyone who's interviewed you in advance or ongoing, any reviews, any playlists, all of that, and engage your fans by resharing React. Don't sleep through the release. Like, don't post super late in the day. Don't forget to post on social media entirely. Don't post the exact same statement across all platforms. Make sure you're adjusting to make the most out of each social media platform. And don't post the same announcement multiple times in one day. And also make sure to keep promoting it after the first day. Make sure to keep that momentum going.
So how to get hype for the track. Goal setting. So goals should be smart but ambitious, especially when it comes to getting hype. You need goals that are strategic, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Ambitious goals push you to work outside of your comfort zone and test the limits of what's realistic. But ambitious goals shouldn't be like totally not rooted in reality at all. Like if you just got like 100 plays on your last track, saying that you're going to get 1 million on your next one is not realistic in any way, shape, or form. Maybe set that bar at like 1,000, 5,000, best case. Alongside each goal, think about the steps and actions you need to take to get there. Now, negative visualization sounds like it should be a thing that you don't want to do, but it's a tool designed to help you prepare for when things don't go your way. Thinking about the worst case scenario can help you find creative alternatives or workarounds to some of the obstacles you'll face in achieving your goals. And it's often used by athletes. The important thing is to not get caught in the negative visualization and make sure that you're not just imagining the worst case. Negative visualization only works if you use it alongside positive visualization. So when setting goals, what we like to do is think about the best case goal. So that's like your ideal outcome. You're going to be really stoked if that's what you get. And that's what you're able to achieve. The must do is like, this is the bar for success. Anything below this is not acceptable. This is not successful. And then you do like a postmortem to try to figure out how to do better for next time. And then the worst case is just like thinking through that negative situation. So like, say for example, your best case goal, you really want to hit 30,000 streams with a track. So that's going to need you to land on independent playlists, probably a few editorial playlists. You're probably going to want to look at using sponsored Instagram stories to drive likely fans to Spotify. Maybe 5,000 is that bar for success. Like you can live with getting 5,000 streams across all platforms. So you're still going to have to submit your song to uncurated sponsored playlists, get some local and community media coverage. Worst case situation, everyone except your mom and your best friend tell you that song sucks, that you never should have released it, and that it's, you know, an abomination to their ears. That's going to suck for you. Like you're not going to feel great about that feedback. But if it's consistent and everyone's saying the same thing, it's time to like take the track, look at it, figure out what you can do better, practice, hone your craft, come back out stronger next time. It's not the end of the world. You're not going to die of embarrassment. You just need to learn from it and move forward.
Okay, so what to include when you're reaching out to get your track attention. So make sure when you're reaching out to someone that you're spelling their name right. Make sure to be very clear about what you're sharing. Is it a music video for a track that's already out, or is it an EP of tracks no one's ever heard? Include descriptive words of what your project is. So make sure to give people a clear idea of what it sounds like. Provide a deadline. So provide a deadline of when the track is going to be out. And get the genre straight. So make sure when you're reaching out to someone that you're reaching out to the right person. If you're reaching out to a big publication, make sure that you're reaching out to whoever's writing about artists in the same genre that you're in. If you reach out to the wrong person, you're just wasting everyone's time. Also bear in mind that journalists, especially like influencers, bloggers, especially at bigger publications, they get a lot of pitches every day. So it's very likely that you're not going to hear back from them the first time around. It's absolutely okay to follow up 2 or 3 times. But if you don't hear back after the few follow-ups, then you just have to let it go. Okay, playlists. So with Spotify, establish which playlists you want to be on, both official and independently curated. There are a lot of independently curated playlists on Spotify that have a lot of traction and that have a lot of influence. This is a good way, this is a good time to figure out, okay, which artists are a little bit ahead of you in your career? Which playlists are they on? Follow that lead. That can help you figure out where you want to go. But also look at your peers. If you know a lot of musicians in your genre, if you know a lot of artists in your genre, look at what playlists they're on. You want to be surrounded by your peers on social media. That way you can make the algorithm work for you. So look where your peers are. Look where artists who are a little bit ahead of you are, or a lot ahead of you are, and figure that out with playlists. Don't pay for a playlisting service. And learn about Spotify for artists. It's a super useful tool. It's very user-friendly. So yeah, get familiar with Spotify for artists. And there are also resources, obviously, outside of Spotify. For example, Majestic Casual on YouTube, hundreds of thousands of followers, tons of content. Yeah. And finally, Bandcamp and SoundCloud. So they are direct upload, so you have to add the tracks yourself. Your distributor won't do this for you. Bandcamp allows you to sell your music and merch online. There's free and paid streaming. There's a paid download option. Music can be tagged, which is very useful if you tag your music in genre, by city, that kind of thing. Both music fans, journalists, will be able to find you, or other musicians will be able to find you through that tag. So if you are using Bandcamp, make sure to make the most of it. They have a strong editorial focus, again, going back to the tags, and they also have their own like newsletter and blog. So get familiar with that too. SoundCloud is a premium streaming service where you can share tracks and mixes, and the focus is more on connecting creators with other creators.
So if you've enjoyed today's presentation, you can learn more about what we do at NightLab at our website, nightlab.ca. If you're looking for a copy of this presentation, reach out to Martina, who heads up a lot of our music stuff, and she can be reached at martina@nightlab.ca. If you want to follow us on Instagram, nightlab.ca, or Twitter, nightlab_ca. So yeah, thank you very much for taking the time out on your Sunday. We really appreciate it, and I'll hand it back over to Victoria.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you, Martina, Sheena, and Nick. That was a really wonderful presentation. Thanks to everyone who tuned in on Facebook and in our Zoom chat. Normally, this is when I would ask, where can people find you online? But you were so prepared. We really appreciate it. If I were to ask, if you could give us one piece of advice for someone to get up the nerve to reach out to collaborate with someone who they don't already have a relationship with, what would you say?
I can take this one. Honestly, just do it. The worst they can say is no. And that's for every single, and this is going to be my piece of just life advice. That's for everything with life, except for something that's going to end your life. The best thing to do is just to do it. I mean, if you think about yourself in a position, if someone reached out to you, more than likely you would be pretty amenable to the idea or listen to what they have to say. So reach out, but be prepared, be respectful, but not too verbose, be kind of casual, and just see where they can go. If it doesn't work out, there's tons of other artists or other people that would be willing to collaborate with you. A lot of the older artists, especially in hip hop right now, are very open to the idea to collaborate with younger up and coming artists. So keep that in mind as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sheena. And I hope that all of you will go forth and create collaborations and expand the offerings that's coming out of our music scene right now. We're heading into winter, and now is the time to be writing and recording. And I'm really looking forward to a few months from now what people are coming out with. Night Lab, thank you again so much for your time and your expertise. House of Paint fam, we are going to be taking a half-hour break and we'll be back with staying on the theme of music, actually, with Justin Holness, aka Jacoda, and he'll be doing a presentation on Tribe, which is a profit-sharing music streaming platform that prioritizes Black and Indigenous artists. Thanks again, Night Lab. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.